Good evening. Thank you for joining us for tonight's special briefing on energy efficiency in the 2022 National Construction Code. I'd like to acknowledge that participants in tonight's session are joining us from the lands of many Aboriginal peoples. I'm personally joining from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I invite you to use the chat function on your Zoom window to acknowledge the country that you are joining us from. My name is Rob McLeod and I work at Renew in policy and in advocacy campaigns to make our homes more resilient in the face of the climate emergency. Tonight's session comes in an important time for how we build our homes in Australia. Right now, community consultation is open on draft changes to the National Construction Code, with the chance of being introduced in 2022. These include raising the minimum NatHERS energy efficiency rating for new homes from 6 to 7 stars in most locations, and introducing a home energy budget. In tonight's webinar, you'll be hearing directly from the Australian Building Codes Board, Natas, and the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, ASBEC, on the content of these changes. Following initial presentations, there'll be time for questions, and we encourage you to use the Q&A button on Zoom to direct questions to our panel. You can also use the chat button to comment more generally. In just a moment, I'll introduce our speakers, but I do also want to take this chance to underline why Renew is pushing hard for changes in the code. It's been over a decade since Australia last increased energy standards for new homes. In that time, we've fallen behind many other countries around the world. The costs of waiting another few years for action are just far too high. Not only is there a pressing need to reduce emissions and to make our homes a part of the transition to an all renewable energy economy, we also know that households need a better deal. Better energy performance really is a win-win-win-win. It not only cuts emissions, it cuts energy bills, it creates jobs, it makes homes healthier, and it reduces pressure on the energy grid. And this is part of where Renew comes into the picture. Renew is advocating strongly for households in this process. Last week, Renew released the findings of our research on the costs and benefits to households from higher energy standards. In our report, Households Better Off, Lowering Energy Bills with the 2022 National Construction Code, Renew modelled the energy use, energy bills and upfront costs for homes across a range of scenarios. I'm actually just going to share my screen to share some of the findings from this for you. Please bear with me for just one moment. So we looked at a standard medium to large 200 metre squared detached home in a bunch of locations around Australia, 4 different cities: Hobart, Melbourne, Sydney and Perth. We selected a range of energy scenarios that both included scenarios possible within the National Construction Code, as well as some highly efficient homes, such as all electric homes. We modelled household energy use and energy bills, as well as the upfront costs for better construction standards for those new homes. Our results really tell a story. Lifting standards cuts bills. When you compare a business as usual home with 6 stars and no solar, regular appliances to a 7-star home with large solar and efficient appliances, the bills come right down. In our analysis by well over $1,000 in a lot of cases over the course of a year. There is an upfront cost to building to a higher standard, but we found that those energy bills pay back for that cost in really quick time. So over the course of a few years, from roughly 6 years up to 10 or 11 years in some cases. And from that point on, over the life of a home, you're laughing, you're better off. When you look at the economic investment and the economic value of making that investment, we again found that households are better off doing that. Using a net present value metric, any number that's over 0 for a net present value is considered a decent investment, and this shows that households really do win out from making this choice or from having this imposed in the code so that all homes can enjoy this. We also compared the difference between how residents' cash flow will go, because if you pay a bit more for your home to a higher build standard, there is a slightly higher monthly mortgage repayment if you're borrowing slightly more. But you also save money on your bills. And we've found in our analysis that by increasing homes from business as usual 6-star homes up to 7-star homes with large solar and with efficient appliances, the monthly bill savings are higher than the increase in monthly mortgage repayments. And what that means is that households are better off from day one, from the very first month of your mortgage. And I think that's a really, really important thing for all of us to remember as we go into the detail of what this means in the code and the changes that we made. Going even further, if you take those savings and you put them into paying off your home loans sooner, then you can actually take months or even in some cases years off the life of your loan. So we had some cases where a 25-year loan can be reduced by more than a year by taking those savings and putting them into paying off your loan faster. And that shows, again, the value of making this possible for everyone through changes. Finally, we've also found that, that lifting the standard of new homes cuts carbon emissions from households. So again, comparing a 6-star home with no solar and basic appliances to a 7-star home with large solar and efficient appliances, household emissions go right down. And this includes, these are net emissions, they include exports from power generated in the home through solar. But it gives you a sense of the importance of better standards for this purpose. I will just attempt to stop sharing my screen. But that gives you a flavour of why this matters to Renew and why I think that this is something that we really need to make happen now. We can't afford to wait for another few years for this to happen. We will share a link to that report in the chat so that anyone who is interested can have a full look at those details that we've found. We have an excellent range of speakers tonight to talk us through the draft changes themselves to the code and what they mean. The first speaker that I would like to invite is Michael Dodd. Michael is here as a representative of the Australian Building Codes Board, the body that oversees the code. Michael, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rob, and good afternoon and evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having me along. As Rob mentioned, I'm one of the dedicated energy efficiency staff at the Australian Building Codes Board. My work here involves project managing some of the energy efficiency changes proposed for the National Construction Code of Australia, also known as the NCC. To begin with, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording this video tonight. I'm in Ngunnawal country in Canberra, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to express my thanks to Renew for hosting this forum and giving me a chance to talk to you. I really do hope you find this interesting. Tonight, I'm going to provide a high-level summary of the recently released energy efficiency provisions proposed for inclusion in the 2022 update of the National Construction Code. The intent is to provide information on the provisions that will assist you in understanding them, so you're better able to make comment on them should you so wish. Comment is open until the 17th of October via the Australian Building Codes Board Consultation Hub. Just Google ABCB Consultation Hub and it should come up. As Rob said in his introduction, this work on energy efficiency represents for the first time in more than a decade that the stringency of the energy efficiency provisions have been increased for residential buildings. And we believe that these changes will make new homes even more comfortable, more efficient, cheaper to run and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So Mia, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so these are the areas I'm going to be covering today, providing an overview of the Australian Building Codes Board and the performance-based nature of the National Construction Code, the different ways that a building can show compliance, demonstrate compliance with the energy efficiency provisions of the code. And then I'll focus on some of the key changes you need to know about. Given the time, I won't be able to go into everything that is changing in great detail, but for the areas I can't cover, there's lots of other information available on the ABCB Consultation Hub, including technical reports, written summaries, as well as the proposed provisions themselves for you to pore over. So please check those out if you would like to know more. I've timed this, should be about 20 minutes today, but please let me know if I'm going over time or if I get sidetracked, and I'll try and get back on message and on course. Next slide, thanks, please. Okay, so imagine, oh, no, one before, please, thank you. Thanks, man. I imagine you may have heard of the Australian Building Codes Board, okay, aka the ABCB, but you might not know much about us as an organisation. So our core function is to update and maintain the NCC. We write the regulation. We're about 50 staff and we're based in Canberra. But there are a couple of things I think it's important to you to know about the ABCB and the NCC, which may help you understand better where you're coming from and may help making comment easier on the proposed provisions. So firstly, on the ABCB, we work on behalf of the Commonwealth, states and territory governments. So we're what we used to call a COAG body. This means that when we undertake something, it has to be agreed to by all the states and territories and the Commonwealth, and it has to be able to be applied across the country. A second thing about us is that we are not the regulator. We don't determine if a building is compliant with the National Construction Code or not. And while as we write the code, we aim to ensure it's clear as possible how to comply with it, we cannot act to determine individual cases of compliance. This is carried out by the local building authority. And I raise that because often in forums like this, we turn to compliance and the importance of compliance. It's a very important question. I just wanted to know that you know that's where the ABCB is coming from on this. Okay, so on the National Construction Code itself, the regulation, it's a document when it's called up by state and territory building and planning legislation, sets the minimum technical standards for safety, health, amenity, accessibility and sustainability of all new buildings and new building work in existing buildings in Australia. Okay, so the two key words from that last sentence are minimum, which means that we need to be mindful that the impact of changes we make are justified, and new, meaning that any work we do only applies to new buildings or existing buildings only if they undertake a significant renovation. So it doesn't apply retrospectively. Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you. One further important point on the National Construction Code is that it's what you'd call a performance-based code, with a set of performance requirements that each building needs to meet, and these vary from building classification and climate zone. It is the performance requirement that sets the minimum level of performance that the building and the building elements need to meet. Mostly, these are set at the whole of building level. There are two for energy efficiency. One focuses on, this is for energy efficiency for residential buildings, I should say. One focuses on how building fabric controls heating and cooling load limits. And there's one that relates to the efficiency of energy using appliances. And I'll talk about both of those aspects through the presentation. The thing about this structure of being performance-based is it allows choice in how you arrive at a building or plumbing solution. And there are multiple pathways available to demonstrate compliance with a given performance requirement. If you want to know more, we do have a YouTube channel. And there is a clip called NCC, a performance-based code. We also offer a CPD course that's only been recently released. It's just targeted at design practitioners. It's called Pathways to Compliance, which may also be helpful. And see the main ABCB website for more details on that. Okay, but I'll go through the options for compliance for energy efficiency specifically now in the next slide. Okay, so there are four key pathways for compliance for energy efficiency. There's the deemed to satisfy elemental, verification using a reference building, NatHERS, and a performance solution. I'll cover them each briefly now. So first, the deemed to satisfy elemental provisions. These set minimum requirements at the building component level. For example, window performance or wall insulation requirements being at a certain R value. It's sometimes called a cookbook approach. Essentially, we are saying, do each of these little things individually and do them right, and the whole house will be energy efficient. Then there's the verification using a reference building verification method, which is essentially an energy modeling approach. You use the elemental provisions that I just talked about, the DTS, to create a reference building based on the geometry of the building that you want to build, where each element meets the deemed to satisfy minimum requirement. You then model the building you want to build, and if your building uses less energy overall, it is compliant. In this model, any one single element could be less than what the deemed to satisfy requirement requires, as long as the building as a whole performs better overall. The NCC also specifies how you need to do your energy model. Next, there's NatHERS. It's more of a benchmarking tool, which is by far the most common approach used in Australia, and probably the one that you're most familiar with. It also assesses a house holistically on a star rating scale. The more stars, the lower the energy use and lower the heating and cooling loads. At the moment, the minimum level of required within the National Construction Code is 6 stars. And as Rob mentioned, we're proposing to increase this to 7. Angela's going to be talking more about NatHERS later, so I won't go into more detail on that now. And finally, there is the possibility of a performance solution, where you would show that your building meets the performance requirements set out in the NC via an alternative pathway. You may use a different tool such as a passive house model or another energy model, or show it from first principles. The main point is that there is a choice in how compliance can be achieved. And I guess the other thing to mention is that you can actually use hybrid versions of each of these pathways as well, if that suits you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. I'm going to briefly go into the key changes to the deemed to satisfy elemental provisions for building fabric of new homes. This is the minimum insulation levels for walls, floors, walls and windows, roofs too. I won't be going into specific numbers, as what the minimums are varies depending on what climate you're in and the construction material. But I do want to talk about the key structural changes to the elemental provisions, because the way things have changed structurally within the NCC between 2019 and 2022. The changes we've made have made the deemed to satisfy pathway more nuanced. They now cover more options and should save practitioners time once they get to know them. Unfortunately, it also makes it very harder to compare 2019 and 2022 directly, as what will need to be done, as I said before, will be done. What will need to be done differently will depend on a number of factors. Okay, so the first thing is that we've done in changing the structure of the NCC is that there's been a conscious effort to align the efficiency you get from the DTS elemental pathway with what you would expect from the NatHERS pathway at 7 stars. We did this by undertaking thousands of energy models for different construction types across the full range of Australia's climates to see how these, in combination, different elements perform, and then benchmark them using NatHERS to see that you're getting to a NatHERS equivalent. And as a result, we think that the outcomes should be more consistent across each pathway. The second thing is that the structure of how you work out what the minimum amount of insulation you need has changed. In 2019, we asked for a total R value for a wall component, which is essentially a measure of how much heat is blocked, total R value, or allowed to transfer through. And essentially, it was a calculation that was needed to be completed to demonstrate compliance, although we did provide some rules of thumb. In 2012, instead of specifying minimum total R values to cover all cases, you were guided to install insulation based on a range of building design factors through a series of tables. And while this means it's now there's a whole raft of new tables within the NCC that look daunting, it's actually a lot simpler than it looks. And I'll go through a couple of examples in a sec. One other thing to note is that we've also made an explicit requirement within the code now around calculation of thermal bridging impact from steel frames. So there are some unique requirements for steel framed homes. And also, this is through the DTS pathway, we have limits on roof colour in warmer climates, so climate zones 1 to 5, and also for wall colour. So it's not quite a white roofs policy, but there are limits on the wall colour when you follow the DTS pathway. Other pathways that are available, there isn't that limitation through the NatHERS tool, for example. Okay, so a quick example for roofs. So next slide, please. Okay, so here's a roof insulation requirement table for climate zone 2, which includes Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. So you can see that once you know where you are in terms of climate, what sort of roof you have. In this case, it's a pitched roof with a flat ceiling. You know what colour it is, which is the solar absorptance, and the ventilation rate, which is either standard or, you can see the insulation you need. So that should be circled in the second to last column. So yeah, thank you, Mia. So essentially, once you know your design and your climate, you go to that table, you can look up. Okay, so next slide for walls, it's a similar process. Once you know what climate zone you're in, and the basic detail about the wall. In this case, it's a wall made of brick. It's of a medium colour, and it's about 2.5 meters tall with a 700 mil eave. And knowing that, you can see that you need to add R2 insulation to achieve compliance. So that's the process now. So I think it's a lot simpler than having to do a total RVA calculation as you had to do previously. And just to note, there's a similar set of tables for floors. Okay, so that's the building fabric. Okay, moving on to windows. Next slide, please. Okay, so what type of window and performance of window that can be selected will vary greatly from house to house. But generally speaking, while we are expecting to see more shading of windows in warmer climates, there is little change in most cases in comparison to the current deemed to satisfy. This is a result driven by the alignment with NatHERS outcomes that I mentioned before, and a greater nuance being made available through addition of a new set of window factors, which are now explicitly included in the calculations you need to do for window performance. These factors should guide a builder to a window best suited to its location. The previous code lacked this subtlety and led to the requirements being over stringent in a number of cases. So the new factors to consider include if the window's on a ground floor or an upper story, if it's for a bedroom, the colour and type of window frame, and how far the window opens. And all of these things combine to predict better performance for the window, and generally speaking, the house overall. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I need to take okay, so this is the other big change that is coming into NCC 2022, and it's a whole of home annual energy use requirement, which relates to appliances, and that second performance requirement I mentioned earlier in terms of whole of home annual energy use. So it's the first time that the National Construction Code will set a maximum annual energy use budget beyond which a residential building cannot go. The budget is based on the societal cost in each state, equivalent to, if it's a class 1 building, 70% of the annual energy use of these benchmark appliances, which is a 3-star heat pump for heating and cooling, so that's a split system, 5-star instantaneous gas water heater, and a house with a lighted power density of 4 watts per square metre. For apartments, it's 100% of that figure. But for class 1 houses, it's 70% of that, of what you would, of the cost to run those appliances in a given climate zone. The proposed approach we're taking is holistic, based on the collective energy used by those items, less any energy provided on site by renewable energy, most likely solar. No minimum level is set for any individual appliance. This is set by minimum energy performance requirement standards. And the approach enables trading between the efficiency of equipment to achieve the annual energy use budget. To determine if the combination of appliances selected needs to be supplemented with on-site renewable energy or upgraded to a more efficient version in order to meet the budget or not, the efficiency factors of potential combinations are published in a new ABCD standard referenced in the National Construction Code. The standard's available for viewing now on the Consultation Hub, but we've also provided a simple whole of home calculator to assist in quickly working out if a requirement's been met or not, as well as the calculator, which is published, I'll go through in just a sec. We've published the methodology and research that underpins these proposals. So again, they're on the ABCB Consultation Hub, and if you're interested in knowing more about how we arrived at this position, then please have a look at the Consultation Hub information. Okay, so next slide, please. I'm going to try and illustrate what this new whole of home requirement means in practice by running through a quick worked example. I'm going to use the whole of home calculator, which is up there on the screen at the moment. This is half of what it looks like. Next slide, you'll see the whole thing. You can see it's relatively simple. It's a single worksheet with, about 6 to 10 boxes to fill in. So this is about the energy use performance requirement, and this is a separate requirement for the building fabric performance requirement. When you follow this pathway and deem to satisfy, and use this calculator, it's made on the assumption that you've met at least a 7-star NatHERS standard for your envelope requirements. You will need to demonstrate that separately, but you don't need to include information about the thermal performance of the house when you're using this calculator. Okay, so first click, Mia. Okay, so the first thing you do is fill in the building information, including the state and climate zone, building class, and floor area. And for floor area, this includes the total area of the dwelling, excluding any garage, but including something like a winter garden. Next click, and you will see that on the basis of that, the information that you've entered calculates a net energy usage allowance for the building. This is the number that we'll now need to keep overall. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so now we've got the target of 3.9 in this case, which is essentially based on the floor area of the building and the climate zone that you're in, and building classification. The next thing we do is enter information about the main air conditioning system, the hot water, pool and spa pump information if you've got that, and if any solar is installed. Okay, so click. In this example, we're assuming that there's a 2-star heat pump, split system air conditioner. It's going to be used to heat and cool the living area, which we have designated as the main heating and cooling unit because we predict that this will get the most use. So even if other air conditioning units are present in a bedroom or another space, we only need to enter the information for the main system. Note at the moment that we're working off the 2012 GEMS determination values. Yes, there is a new set of GEMS minimum energy performance standards. So GEMS, sorry, is the star rating you have in appliances. And there's a new system as of 2019, and that's what we'll be using going forward in this tool. So click, and we've now selected a heat pump hot water heater, and we've left the left blank because this house doesn't have a pool or a spa or any solar at this point in time. So we can see with this information entered that this combination of appliances, so the heat pump hot water system and the split system at 2 stars, should be compliant with the requirements. So click, and that's shown by the actual net energy use is turning green up there in the top corner. Okay, I'll run through a slightly different example with this quickly. So you can see the difference by selecting a gas instantaneous system. So next slide, please. Okay, so chosen a gas instantaneous system instead of a heat pump. And as you can see, so if you click, please, this changes the balance of energy use and cost. Click. And you can see that where the annual energy use target is gone red, as shown up there in the corner. So this would not be a compliant combination of appliances. So next slide, please. Okay, to get this combination of appliances to comply, we'd need to make some changes to the selection. So click. So one thing that's quick and easy to do would be to add solar PV to the dwelling, which click brings the whole budget back into green. But other combinations of systems could be applied. So in this case, we've overshot by quite some way. And you might, those of you, eagle-eyed of you, may see that when we added in 5.8 kilowatts worth of solar, it reduced the number which was red down to by 5.8 to minus 0.2, but we only need to get down below 3.9. So in this case, I think from where we were before, from 5.9, you'd only probably need to put in 1.5 kilowatts worth of solar in order to comply. Okay, so next slide, please. One further key change for residential buildings, if they're following a deemed to satisfy pathway, is introduction of some mandatory requirements for fans, again, through the DTS pathway. Fans are great, highly beneficial in providing cost-effective cooling in warmer climates. So there's new requirements for fans in climate zones 1 to 3 and climate zone 5. Okay, so I just want to mention that because I'm a big fan of fans as efficiency measure. Okay, so next slide, please. So one final thing from me that I wanted to highlight before I hand back to Rob is to draw your attention to a new set of provisions designed to make it easier to retrofit solar panels, electric vehicle charging equipment, and battery storage equipment into apartment and commercial buildings. So these are provisions that apply to apartment buildings and commercial buildings. So they're positioned in Section J of the National Construction Code, Volume 1 of the National Construction Code. And these provisions essentially require dedicated slots for circuit breakers, which would be labelled on the main electrical distribution boards to say that this is to be used for solar, batteries, and EV charging. And then space for cable trays to connect to distribution boards adjacent to car parking spaces in all buildings to ensure that a percentage of car parks can be easily converted to support electric vehicle charging. It's a stitch in time saves 9 type measure. So we're leaving the space there so you can easily accommodate electric vehicle charging in the future. But we're not requiring electric vehicle charging at this point in time. And further, for solar, the roofs of all commercial buildings will need to leave 20% of their roof area free so that solar panels could be easily installed down the track. And warehouse roofs will need to warehouse roofs specifically, will need to make sure that they're structurally sound enough to be able to support the addition of solar panels in the future. So they'll have to design to assuming that solar panels will be installed in the future. Okay, so that's all the technical bit for me. Next slide, please. I'll just, if you're keen to make comment, or to submit a comment on the proposals, you can do so via the ABCB consultation hub. Please keep in mind that we're seeking comment on the proposed changes to the NCC only. So when you open up the provisions, you'll see a change is indicated by the presence of red text, which is struck through, or green text, which is underlined. And they're the things that we're seeking comment on. And comment on those provisions is open until October 17. If you've got commentary on any other part of the NCC that's not changing or not included in the consultation documents, you can do so by submitting a proposal for change separately via the main ABCB website. And you can do that at any point in time. Okay, so next slide. So if you would like to know more, please visit the ABCB consultation hub and read the further information we have there, including those technical reports. Going forward, once comment closes, we'll be taking what we learned through public comment to refine the provisions. The results of these will be made available for adoption in September of next year. And then will be picked up by the states and territories following that, and most likely probably a year following that date. So that's all from me. I hope it made sense. Thank you for watching, and goodbye, and happy to take questions. So thanks, Rob. I'll hand back to you now.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate you running through what is a very, very detailed and meaty topic in a very short amount of time in that way. So thank you so much. And there will be a session for questions following this. We've had some great questions come in, and we're looking forward to answering those at the end of the session. The next speakers that I would like to introduce are here on behalf of NatHERS, the National Home Energy Rating Scheme. I'd like to very warmly welcome Angela Newing and Joe Brennan from NatHERS.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Rob. My name is Angela Newey, and I'm from the Commonwealth Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources. And I manage one of the teams that delivers the nationwide house energy rating scheme, commonly known as NatHERS. And my team also delivers the Your Home Guide, which is Australia's guide to building environmentally sustainable homes. So I'm going to be joined today by my colleague, Joe Brennan, and between us, we are going to cover off how NatHERS supports the proposed energy efficiency provisions of the National Construction Code. So firstly, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, and pay my respects to their elders past and present and emerging. For me, like Mike, it's the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. And I'd like to also pay my respects to any Indigenous people joining us here this evening. So I'm going to give you a bit of background, a bit of policy context on our work. I'll step you through what NatHERS is before I outline how NatHERS can help people understand what a 7-star house looks like and provide options for how to achieve that. I'll briefly note some of the thermal improvements we're making to NatHERS, but I won't go into that in too much detail because it is pretty technical. Then I'll hand over to Jo, and she'll step you through the NatHERS whole of home expansion. There we go. I seem to have missed one slide, so I'll just go back. Here we go. By way of policy context, in 2019, energy ministers agreed the trajectory for low energy buildings and its addendum. These documents set out a national plan to achieve zero energy and carbon ready buildings. I always think that's a bit of a mouthful, so I'll just explain what that means. So zero energy and carbon ready buildings refers to buildings that have an energy efficient thermal shell. So the thermal shell being the roof, the walls, the windows and the floor and the insulation. An energy efficient thermal shell, energy efficient appliances, and are ready to install.
Hi everyone, I hope I'm not speaking over Angela at this point, but it appears that we have had a tech issue, and so we're not hearing at the moment. Well, I'll tell you what, in the meantime, this might be putting Michael on the spot a little bit because we were expecting to do questions and answers at the end, but we do have some specific questions which were coming in for the ABCB. So if I could be mean and do this to you, Michael.
No, that's okay. I thought that might be, it's a good go-to. I had the same thought. And some great questions as well. And I'll do my best to answer. Some of them I may need to take on notice. But where would you like to begin with the questions?
Well, I was not actually prepared in a list, but I will start with a couple of questions came in about the metrics that you were using. So particularly there were a couple of questions asking if you can explain what societal cost is. And while covering that, because it might be related, a few people were also interested in the particular metrics that we saw as numbers on the calculator. And so what did those mean?
Yeah, sure. So those questions. So societal cost is, it's the measure we've used to determine what that annual energy budget for a house should be. So individuals who, when they are showing compliance, won't need to work this out themselves unless they are actually producing a performance solution from first principles. And we do have a societal cost metric, so you could do the whole house from first principles. The way to think about it, it's more than just the cost of your energy bill. So it includes a cost in it for, excuse me, the actual cost of the energy. It includes a cost for greenhouse gas emissions. So, you know, $1 per tonne of greenhouse gas emissions metric as well, and for peak demand. So how those have been set are detailed in the some of the supporting documents I have on the website, but it's a bigger cost than that. And what we're trying to do with this societal cost metric is to drive houses as much as possible to houses which are best at dealing with peak heat and in peak cold, but mainly peak heat, which is when with that extra cost for peak demand, and more greenhouse efficient. What we've done in terms of what's behind the calculator and the whole of home standard is run all of these different combinations of appliances, and then to give you this score. And so it's the societal cost is a metric that we've used then to set how a benchmark against which how different combinations of appliances or combinations of appliances with solar will then perform. In terms of the 3.9, which I pointed to, it could be seen as kilowatts. Essentially, there's in terms of the kilowatts of solar you would need to get to a benchmark pass. But it's in another way of looking at it is that it is a made up factor by the ABCB, which we are using to show whether you're passing or failing. So it is something that probably we do need to develop some better communications about over the coming, I guess, the coming weeks, should we go forward with this. But you would have seen that we had a score of 5.9, and then we added 5.8 kilowatts of solar to it, and it dragged it down to below zero. So it does equate closely to a solar PV installed kilowatt metric. Yeah, so, but yeah, they're both very good questions.
Really great, thank you. We do have a couple of other questions coming in about the choice of appliances and particularly connections to gas. So people have asked, were the gas appliances chosen specifically in those how do gas appliances compare to electric? Is there a specific decision in the code that is favouring one fuel over another?
We tried as much as possible. We were asked, so the process of the policy that Angela was just talking about, I'm not sure, I thought Angela might be about to jump in, which was the directive for energy billings policy. Oh, she's back. I can answer that question later on, but yeah, I'll let Angela continue on.
Well, Michael, I might put it on you to carry on answering that specific one, and then we'll jump to that.
Yeah. So when we were asked to consider the upgrade to the code, we were asked to be, as even-handed as we could with regard to different technology types. Through taking a holistic approach to the whole of home setting. So we didn't want to discriminate too much on the basis of a given technology type or different fuel source. But I personally don't like the term technology neutral. I don't think it's possible. I think through what we're doing through the code, we are trying to achieve a set of policy objectives. And through the trajectory, we're asked to try and develop provisions which would lower energy bills, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, make homes more comfortable and more resilient, especially to extreme weather, and to reduce demand on the electricity grid as much as is possible. And so that led us to the use of the societal cost metric. And what that ends up doing is it does preference all electric houses with solar. So the way that we've set the metric, and the primary reason for that is you can, when you have solar on your home, you can consume the energy within the house and use that to offset the overall cost. Whereas if you have a gas appliance, you have to export a lot of electricity to make up the cost that you have lost. And so a all electric house, well, you know, the first example I showed, which was 2 stars, not particularly efficient as a minimum, but with a heat pump hot water system, was able to comply without the addition of solar. With gas, you would need, in most cases, to be adding solar PV to your home in order to get to the same cost. So we think the fairest way to make the comparison between appliances on the basis of cost, and as a result of that, it does end up preferencing all electric homes over gas homes. But you can still have a gas home if you want. So part of the work that we had to do, you know, we don't want to limit choice of people who want to have gas in their homes. We weren't given a mandate to be able to do that through this policy. But if you do install gas appliances, then you will. In order to meet the budget we've set, it will require solar.
Yes, and Renew has certainly. We'll come back to Angela in just a moment, so feel free to turn on your video if you are there. Renew has certainly been pushing for some time to make sure that existing parts of the code, which have actually, in certain states, have actually blocked all electric homes, for example, requirements to have gas-boosted hot water in certain scenarios, should be removed at a state level. So that's a separate conversation with what we're having. But our analysis is showing really clearly that that people who make the decision to go all electric will be better off. And I think that's something that we're really keen to emphasize, even to the side of the conversation about what the code itself should be. So to the folks at NatHERS, I think we're having some more connection issues. And again, my apologies, that might be at my end. What I might do is actually jump through, and I would really like to welcome, I'm very pleased that we have Alison Scotland here with us in this webinar. Alison is the Interim Executive Director of ASBEC, the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, and she will give us an industry perspective on these changes. So welcome, Alison. And you're on mute. There we go.
Thanks, Rob. And hello, everyone. So mine will be a nice, quick and snappy presentation, and hopefully the NatHERS team will be able to come back and join us when all the tech issues are sorted. But just checking you can see my screen. Hopefully good. Excellent. So I'm giving you a bit of a perspective on behalf of the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council. So for those of you who do not know who ASBEC is, we are a peak collaborative forum for organisations in the built environment that champion a sustainable future through policy engagement and advocacy. So we are a not-for-profit volunteer organisation, and all of our members commit their time, resources and energy to developing really practical opportunities for a more sustainable built environment. We truly represent a really great collective industry voice, and our voices combined, we found a really quite powerful when interacting with policymakers. So we have a strategic plan that is updated very regularly as the industry and environment evolves. And that strategic plan informs the work of our task groups. So they're aligned to our policy priorities. In the case of the subject matter today, the NCC, our wonderful building quality task group has been incredibly active over the many years that it's been in existence. And we've got a really proud and influential history in advocating for sensible, evidence-based energy efficiency standards. So along with a forward trajectory for future standards for buildings, equipment and appliances. Here on the screen is an example of what ASBEC has produced and its members have produced. Sorry, I've got kids in the background, typical Zoom environment. A few of them on screen have been really instrumental, we believe, in setting out a policy roadmap for the building sector towards 2050. So 2016, we've got low carbon, high performance. That provided the why in the form of an evidence base for improving the energy performance of Australia's buildings. Built to Perform was then it helped articulate the how, and it called for a zero carbon ready building code, and it provided a range of step changes for minimum efficiency standards for the NCC, and that informed the trajectory, which we know has been mentioned earlier in this session. A bit of a summary about what our policy documents entailed. You know, buildings account for over half of Australia's electricity use and almost a quarter of our greenhouse gas emissions. So it makes sense to focus on the building sector, and the technology exists already to make those changes. I'm not going to read this out on the screen, but the reports really highlight the benefits that energy efficiency in buildings can deliver. And, you know, this is absolutely necessary for not only our emissions reductions, but for comfort and health of building occupants. And in terms of the trajectory, we, excuse me. Sorry, I have children singing in the background, but I'll back with you. So in terms of the National Construction Code, the policy papers outlined that over half of Australia's buildings in 2050 will be built after 2019. So 2019 was a step change for the National Construction Code, introducing a range of energy efficiency measures for commercial buildings. And now the time is 2022 is for our residential buildings. So for us, for ASBEC, we consider this as absolute priority. We want this to happen. As Mike mentioned in his presentation before, it's been over a decade since changes or energy efficiency measures have been changed for our homes. So the research in our publication Built to Perform showed that delaying cost-effective changes to the code by just 3 years, so say we didn't get a change in 2022 and delayed it to 2025, it could cost $2 billion in household energy bills between now and 2030. That delay would also be locking in 9 million tonnes of emissions to 2030 and 22 million tonnes to 2050. So we are incredibly supportive of having these changes go ahead next year. To help make this happen, ASBEC is very committed to running a range of technical and policy forums with its membership, and in conjunction with the Property Council, we're hosting a series of technical forums over the coming weeks to really have a good review of the draft provisions and provide any input we can to ensure that they are as sound as possible. So if you are interested in participating in the forums or want to know more, please feel free to contact me and Rob. You're welcome to share my contact details. We've already had a Class 2 forum this week, and in the next 2 weeks we'll be dealing with class 1. And then the week after that, we will be looking at the commercial buildings provisions, so the setups for electric vehicles. It's okay. We are also hoping to, or we will be running a forum on the regulatory impact statement. So that consultation RIS will be released in the coming weeks, hopefully by the end of September. And that provides a really important economic analysis about the cost benefits of the changes. So that, combined with the technical provisions in the draft, it's a really important combination, because it's the impact that will determine whether or not these provisions go ahead. So again, if you want to be involved, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'd love to hear from you. So the simple message before I hand back to Angela, because I think she's back on board, if we are serious about reducing our emissions, we need to start with our step changes. So at the very least, we need to ensure that this minimum change, moving up to NatHERS 7-star, happens for 2022. It's an important change that needs to happen. We know there is a lot more work that needs to happen, but it's an important part of the process, because, you know, buildings offer such a cost-effective, job-rich opportunity, not only for emissions abatement, but it's your homes. It helps with comfort, it helps with health, it helps with energy bills. So an efficient home is a comfortable, healthy, happy home. So let's focus on getting these changes through for 2022, and we look forward to continue working with you for trajectory changes in the years ahead. So thanks very much, and back to you, Rob.
Thank you so much, Alison. Really, really appreciate that presentation and that information. Thank you. Comfortable, happy, and healthy homes, I think, were the key words there, and that's something we can all very strongly support. Now, I do believe that the folks from NatHERS will in the room, and we'll be able to speak to that presentation. So I will hand back over to Angela if you're there.
Thank you, Rob, and apologies, everyone. My computer told me I had an unexpected problem. So yes, we did. All right, look, I'm just going to share my screen again and see if we can get back to where we were at. Okay, I'm going to assume, not completely sure where I cut out, but I'm going to assume that I already explained what zero energy and carbon ready buildings are, because I don't want to have to do that again. So the key aspects of the trajectory, as we've agreed to increase the energy provisions in the National Construction Code, expand NatHERS to offer whole of home tools to cover the energy efficiency of compliances and renewable energy generation, and to deliver a home energy rating framework for existing homes to complement what NatHERS currently does, which is provide energy assessments for new builds and major renovations. So the objectives of the trajectory are to lower energy bills for households and businesses, to improve occupant health and comfort, to reduce energy wastage, improve resilience to extreme weather and reduce blackouts, and also to help Australia meet its international greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So following the agreement of the trajectory, the Australian government provided funding to improve energy efficiency and support the implementation of the trajectory. It provided funding for best practice information and tools, including an update of the Your Home resource, which we are currently doing. We expect to be releasing a 6th edition of the Your Home book and website soon. And funding was also provided to expand NatHERS for that to develop that whole of home module for appliances and renewable energy and extend it to offer energy ratings for existing homes. So we have been busily progressing these activities ahead of the NCC 2022 rollout. How do they all fit together, I hear you ask? So in short, they all complement each other. The proposed changes for the National Construction Code contribute to the trajectory and achieving its aims to improve energy efficiency in the building sector. And the changes that we're making to NatHERS and Your Home also contribute to the trajectory and help people understand and to implement the new requirements in the code. So tonight, Joe and I will be talking about two key intersections between these various threads of work. So namely the proposed increase to the minimum energy efficiency requirements from 6 to 7 stars and the proposed whole of home energy budget. But before I go any further, when I uploaded this, I did have a little video, but I have now reverted to a different version. I might just, look, I'm just going to skip the video. I think the video was nice. It gave you a little bit of an insight about NatHERS. It's on our website. But I think, I'll talk you through these next slides instead. So NatHERS is not just a tool, a model, it is a whole scheme. So we have our communications and processes, which is our guidance and our technical notes that sort of step people through how they have to do an energy rating. And of course, it includes the NatHERS certificate and the energy rating report, which are key outcomes of a NatHERS rating. The scheme accredits NatHERS software tools to ensure that they all deliver consistent and reliable results. And we also have a suite of assessor accrediting organisations that assist and oversee our assessor community, who are the ones who really engage with the software and do those energy ratings. So these assessor accrediting organisations help to ensure that those assessors follow the correct protocols for NatHERS and deliver consistent and reliable energy ratings. So NatHERS certificates and star ratings are used by a range of different audiences, from homeowners and builders, certifiers, all levels of government, and more recently financial institutions, for a range of different purposes. NatHERS is the primary way in which new builds and major renovations demonstrate they meet the requirements of the National Construction Code. In the last financial year, more than 90% of new building approvals did follow the NatHERS pathway. And NatHERS star ratings are also used as a design tool for homeowners and builders to compare different house designs and their performance characteristics. The certificate and the star ratings can help prospective home buyers understand the thermal performance of a home they might buy and understand how expensive and comfortable that house might be to live in. And increasingly, recently, the NatHERS certificate has been used by homeowners to demonstrate that they're building an energy efficient product, and that qualifies them for some of these new green loan, cheaper home loan rates that financial institutions have been offering. So the move from 6 to 7 stars, Natas can help with that shift. There's many ways that you can build to achieve 7 stars, and Natas really helps people find the design that's right for them. It provides flexibility for people to make their individual preferences and choices about which design features they want to prioritise. And it gives them an assessment of when they've met the minimum requirements or exceeded the minimum requirements. Your home can also help make that shift from 6 to 7 stars. Your home provides nationally consistent best practice information to help build energy efficient homes. And it's an important avenue to raise awareness amongst consumers of the benefits of having an energy efficient house, such as lower energy bills, a more comfortable home to live in, and less greenhouse gas emissions. Your home is also really widely used by the building industry. They use it to learn about emerging technologies and new building techniques, and how to build skills and capabilities to improve the energy efficiency of their designs, to meet either increasing minimum standards, but also to respond to the increasing demand from consumers to have energy efficient and sustainable homes. So the Your Home website provides a number of case studies that show how the theory has been put into practice in real life. And it also provides a suite of free architect designed energy efficient house plans that can be downloaded off the Your Home website. So these plans are all 7 stars. Hang on a minute, I have missed, there's a missing one. Oh, that's right, because this is the other one. So the plans are all seven stars in different climate zones around Australia. And they use standard and affordable building materials and techniques to be broadly accessible around the country. And they can be downloaded and used as is, or they can be adapted with the help of a designer or an architect to suit different people's, site constraints or particular needs. So this is a picture of a house built using one of our Design for Place house plans. This is a 3-bedroom house in Inverloch, Victoria. And this house rates at 8.2 stars. It cost the owners $300,000 to build. And there is a case study about this on our website. So it really, what the case studies show, I think, is that it really doesn't have to be costly to build to 7 stars. There are a number of simple design features that can be implemented early in the design journey that will really make a big difference to a home's thermal performance. So, for example, orientation is key. Repositioning a house plan on the block early in the design phase can have a lasting and significant impact on the thermal performance. Building for your localised climate is important, ensuring appropriate levels of shade and solar access, depending on whether you're in a tropical or a temperate or a cool climate. Avoiding too many floor-to-ceiling windows is important, as inappropriately placed and inappropriately sized windows allow heat to escape in winter and increase heat gain during summer. And of course, installing roof and ceiling insulation is important and can save 45% or more on heating and cooling costs. So these are just a few of the design principles that underpin Natas in Your Home. And I think to sort of sum up on that thread, NatHERS and your home help builders, designers and consumers make informed choices about designing an energy efficient home. So this is my final slide. It's a list of some of the software changes we're making to NatHERS to roll out alongside the National Construction Code in 2022. Their aim is to improve the accuracy of our energy ratings. They're a bit technical, so I will refrain from going into a lot of detail on these, but I'm happy to answer questions afterwards if people are interested. So just briefly, we are implementing new climate files. We've recalibrated the star bands. We're implementing improved linkages between NatHERS and the ABCB's new heating and cooling load limit standard. And we've also developed a thermal bridging capability for NatHERS to respond to that proposed thermal bridging requirements in the construction code. So that really concludes my part of the talk. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Rob, for the opportunity to speak. And I will hand over now to Jo.
Thanks very much, Ange. I'm just going to bring up those slides. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through quickly the whole of home expansion and how the whole of home expansion is going to support those new requirements that Mike talked about earlier, in particular the new whole of home energy budget that's being introduced. So I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about the new NatHERS certificate features that we've been developing, and really want to focus on what the changes mean for you. So we're really excited to announce the expansion of NatHERS to whole of home ratings. The whole of home expansion is just that. The ratings now include all of the major energy uses in the home. So in addition to the star rating of the thermal shell of the building's performance, the new expanded scheme is going to provide information about the energy performance of heating and cooling appliances, hot water systems, pool and spa pumps, lighting, and solar voltaic systems and batteries. So the NatHERS ratings are designed to be really simple and easy to understand. They're really aimed at ensuring consumers are able to design beyond minimum standards. So the aim is to ensure that you can compare the performance of different home designs when you're either building or designing a new home, and that you can find the right design that's really suited to the climate, the block, and your needs. We're really excited to be able to introduce the concept that you can design and build homes that have little or no energy bills, and you can easily see how that home exceeds or meets the minimum standards. On the right-hand corner of the slide, you can actually see the whole of home performance rating, which has been proposed on the new certificate. Some of the other features to talk to you about is that whole of home performance rating. So the new rating scale is proposed to range from 1 to 100. And that's where basically 1 is a low performance energy performance home, and 100 is equivalent to a world leading energy efficient home. These features ensure that you can really differentiate between high and then very high performing homes, and also from those that are meeting the minimum compliance thresholds. The other thing we've introduced is an expanded checklist for checking the home is designed and built according to the building plan that was used for the NatHERS rating. I haven't shown an image of that here today, but if you were interested, we've got a guide and the draft new certificate up on the NatHERS website, so you can see all the details there. So designers, builders, certifiers, surveyors can actually, and homeowners can use that new checklist throughout each stage of the home's design and build process to ensure that it includes all those key features that were, part of the original plan. And we've also included new schedules for appliances, on-site renewable energy, and battery systems. So the schedules include really detailed information about the appliances and the energy generation and storage that have been entered by the assessor and used to create the NatHERS rating. The certificate also includes a range of new information about the predicted energy use, cost and greenhouse gas emissions. And we're really hoping this will help consumers understand what appliances have the biggest impact on their home's annual energy use, as well as energy costs and greenhouse gas emissions. Appliance choice can be a really easy way to improve a home's energy rating and make it more comfortable to live in, and also help to save on energy bills. So new information will also be available about how much of the home's annual electricity use will be met by renewable energy, and that's there on the slide. Oh, it's a bit blurry, but you can see that in more detail in our guide on the website as well. The certificate includes a percentage of electricity that's being used by the home, as well as that being exported to the grid. And you can see how your home performs with and without solar and the associated greenhouse gas emissions and savings. So as I mentioned, see the guide on our website. We've also got an overview of the proposed expansion to whole of home and a range of frequently asked questions there. So how does NatHERS expansion support the NCC? Well, it will provide an assessment that's going to demonstrate, as Angela talked about, whether the home meets or exceeds that new proposed 7-star thermal performance rating, as well as the new whole of home energy budget. And you can trade off between different technologies and appliance efficiencies, and that sort of Mike ran us through a simplified example before. I think the thing to note about the NatHERS pathway is that it's actually able to offer a wider range of appliance technologies than is currently available under the deemed to satisfy elemental pathway for the NCC. So that does allow that nuanced approach to a wider range of appliance technologies. An efficient water heating system can save lots of energy in the home over a year, and the installation of efficient lighting such as LEDs and appropriately sized and efficient heating or cooling systems can save money and ensure your home is comfortable and resilient in a range of climatic conditions. You can also offset your home's energy use by installing on-site energy generation, and similar to sort of how Mike showed that worked in the calculator, you can do that through the NatHERS tools. So the Your Home and NatHERS tools help builders, designers and consumers maximise their choices in designing an energy efficient home. So the expansion to NatHERS creates a pathway for the future of bespoke and volume builds across Australia. Consumer awareness in the benefits of sustainable and healthy homes has really seen a marked uptake in the demand for homes that provide comfortable and cost-effective and energy-efficient residences. The expansion of NatHERS is being designed to support industry and homeowners make informed choices about how they can move towards those net zero energy and carbon ready homes. And as Ange mentioned, those are homes with the efficient thermal shell, efficient appliances, and are ready to install renewable energy. So building 7-star homes with efficient appliances can really significantly cut your energy bills, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save energy. And it helps to ensure that homes are comfortable during heat waves, cold snaps and power outages. Savings from better energy performance can actually wipe months or years off home loans, for example, and there was some work done around that under the trajectory. The proposed changes for NCC and Natas Whole Home prepare us for homes of the future, and it's a really exciting stage we're at with all the work that's going on at the moment. So how can you get involved? Just wanted to sort of spruik a couple of upcoming events. So we'll be seeking your feedback on the proposed changes to Natas, and we really want to understand more about how these changes may affect you and your views. So details about the new options available under Natas for assessing, rating and improving your new or existing home will be released later this year. You can subscribe to our newsletter to keep up to date with the latest developments, including Sustainable House Day and the release of the new Your Home Guide. And you can also find out more about that upcoming Natas consultation. So please get in touch with us if you've got any questions, and I really just wanted to thank you for your time this evening.
Hello everyone, thanks Renew for inviting me to speak at this forum, and I'm sorry I can't be there to speak to you all live. My name's Michael Lee. I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I'm excited to share my perspective on the National Construction Code proposal based on our research at ClimateWorks Australia. Our main focus at ClimateWorks is supporting our society's transition to net zero emissions in line with the International Paris Agreement on climate change. Our research shows that improving the energy performance of new buildings when they're built beyond today's minimum standards is really important for this transition. But we're behind the 8 ball on this. By some estimates, the energy performance of new housing in Australia is about 40% worse than housing in other developed countries with similar climates. A change in the energy regulations is due, and in fact is overdue, because the National Construction Code energy requirements for housing haven't changed much in over 10 years. Luckily, our state and territory governments plan to substantially update minimum energy standards for all new homes built in Australia from next year. They agreed to this in their joint Trajectory for Low Energy Buildings policy released in 2019. And now, as you know, we've seen the proposed changes for the National Construction Code 2022. It's in the interests of Australian households to see this happen. We published research with the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council that showed a stronger National Construction Code could reduce household energy bills by up to $900 a year, saving a total of $21 billion in residential energy bills between now and 2050. When you combine the changes for all building types, including commercial buildings, this could lead to around 15 million tonnes of emission savings between now and 2030, and 78 million tonnes to 2050. Our research shows that these ongoing benefits of stronger energy standards outweigh any potential capital costs. In fact, introducing these requirements for new housing today would make it cheaper overall to deliver better housing that reduces emissions, because it means households of the future aren't faced with expensive retrofit bills to bring housing energy efficiency up to a decent standard. We can't afford to delay these changes. A bit over 1 million homes are expected to be built around Australia between 2022 and 2025. Our research shows that delaying cost-effective changes to the code by just 3 years, so for example, implementing changes in the 2025 code instead of 2022, could cost $2 billion in household energy bills between now and 2030. The first step to delivering these benefits for Australian households will be for our state and territory governments to adopt the proposed energy standards for the 2022 National Construction Code. Adopting these stronger standards will help make it easier and more cost-effective to deliver lower energy bills, more comfortable and resilient homes, and to decarbonise Australia's built environment in the decades to come. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you, Angela. Really appreciate those very clear summaries of where things are at with NatHERS and the changes that are underway and what it can do to improve household energy performance. So thank you so much for those presentations. We're This session is due to finish at 7:30, and we have a few more minutes which I'd like to devote to some question and answer. There will also be opportunities to respond in writing or through further links that we send out to answer more questions. So please feel free to keep them coming. We've got some great questions in here. I'm going to throw a couple of questions to the whole panel all at once, which you can have a go at your preference of them, and feel free to turn on your videos if you would like to be visible to the audience. One question that's come up quite a few times here is 7 stars the right level? So should we be going further? Are there ways that residents can learn more about this, and will the systems that are in place help people understand how to go beyond 7 stars? I'll also, just at the same time as asking that, just ask a couple of supplementary questions to that potentially are covering similar issues. First of all, is there any accounting for embedded energy in buildings in any of these systems, or any requirements around that? And are there, let's call them alternative, quote unquote, forms of construction being considered as part of this? So, for example, homes that are off-grid or using non-traditional materials, are they barred or are they encouraged in any of these systems? I might throw, that's a big lot of questions to throw all at once. I don't feel you have to answer them all, but I might throw that to Michael first, and then we'll go through the panel.
Yep. Thank you, and great questions. And I've been doing my best to answer as many as I can in the chat as we go along. Why 7 stars and not 8 or 9? So if you recall in my presentation, I talked about the code setting minimum standards. And so when we go through and make a regulation change, we have to be mindful of the impact across the industry in order to justify setting that new minimum standards. And at 7 stars, performance is getting pretty good within a house. It's actually not that far from net zero. So at 7 to 7.5 stars, plus efficient appliances and plus solar, you're getting really close in a lot of circumstances to getting to a net zero home, and whether that's net zero carbon, net zero energy use. That 70% budget that I mentioned in my appliance, when you hit that, that's close to the home being with solar, close to net energy positive. So it's not on the basis of cost. So it's not necessarily carbon neutral, but it's getting close to that. And the thing that happens as you increasingly improve the efficiency of your building's shell is that you have less energy to save. The other thing that's happening is our grid is decarbonising, and the price of electricity is going down, not so much gas. But the price of electricity is coming down if you look at forward projections for pricing of electricity. So you've got less energy to save, and you've got it's the cost of that energy in terms of its dollar cost, not talking about its greenhouse cost, but we're trying to, we're adding that value in, is getting smaller and smaller. So there's diminishing returns going on. So through the code, as a setting of minimum standards, we're trying to strike the right balance. And I personally think that 7 stars with this whole of home energy budget that we're introducing is a good minimum standard to get to. And and also from a purely bureaucratic point of view, ABCB was asked to investigate that level. So that's what we did. And it was also a nice round number, so just to make things easier. In terms of embodied carbon, alternative construction, off-grid houses, so off-grid, I might deal with the first, and I've actually answered that question in the chat as well as the person who put through, but for those who haven't seen it, so the 2 performance requirements, and this is another question that came up a lot, you have to meet them separately. So you can't install more solar and have a worse envelope. You have to get to at least that 7-star equivalent. You can't go below that by using more solar. So they're 2 separate requirements. So for an off-grid home, you would still need to meet the building fabric requirements. And that's essentially because those requirements, although they set heating and cooling load limits, they're they're thermal comfort related. So they're about the internal temperature within the space as much as anything else. And so we're saying that, you know, to meet that thermal comfort requirement, you still have to meet the on-board requirement. For the energy budget, you're off grid, you'll sail through. You don't have to worry about that at all. You'll be able to, you know, you're a walk-up start for that performance requirement being off grid, given the amount of solar you're going to have. And your societal cost will be zero. Embodied carbon, and it's, again, I've put some words on this. It's not something that we're considering at the moment. It is something I think is the next stage for building regulation. And I know that New South Wales State Government is looking at this through MECLA, is being looked at overseas. I don't think it is in a building code anywhere in the world at the moment, but a lot of people are talking about it and looking at it. It's a tricky thing to do within a regulation, and it's also, for me, a secondary priority to reducing buildings' ongoing emissions. And I saw a figure this week, which was, at the moment, 75% to 80% of a building's greenhouse gas emissions are in its operational phase. When we decarbonise the grid, the embodied energy in its materials will be the majority. So I'd say let's get emissions down within houses first and then move to carbon. Looking at it, there may be things you can do with performance solutions. And in terms of alternative construction methods and low emissions houses, which have that low, there may be a performance solution that you could look at, as long as you're showing you're meeting the performance requirements. There may be some ways of working through, but there's nothing through the 4 main pathways, or sort of 3 main pathways that you can use at the moment. But that's probably enough from me on that one.
No, thank you. That's great, Michael. That's a very comprehensive answer to those questions. I would like to throw to Alison, to Joe, or to Angela as well to add in any comments that you may have around in response to those questions before we wrap up. Alison, is there?
Yes, happy to jump in. And from an ASBEC point of view, the more efficiency, the better. We absolutely encourage as many people as possible to go above and beyond. From this perspective, however, we're just trying to get the minimum, raise the bar with the minimum. The reason we focus on the minimum, or we are focusing on the minimum, is it's sort of raising the bar across Australia, with a drive to ensure sort of equality. So, we know that potentially price is a factor. It might be a socioeconomic issue. If you can afford to be more efficient, you can. So that's why we want to focus on the minimum. We absolutely, we support the trajectory and the targets with the trajectory. So that's what we really want to do. We want to be able to ensure that there are practical ways to achieving that step change. And at the moment, the focus is 7, but if we can go higher and faster, we would absolutely love that.
Absolutely. And finally, to Joe.
Thanks, Rob. Look, I'd probably just make a plug for Natas expansion in a couple of ways. I think we talked a little bit about how the new ratings can show really, well, the ratings scheme itself shows how you go above and beyond the minimum. So it's always just trying to encourage people, you can go above and beyond, what is the current 6 stars and what is proposed to be the 7 stars. And with the whole new whole of home energy budget, they're all really great tools to support consumers to go above and beyond, and the regulation doesn't have to do everything. The other thing I'd say is that Natas is also extending to in-home assessments, and we're talking about a huge suite of buildings there with around 9 million existing buildings in Australia, which presents a really significant opportunity for emissions reduction and energy savings in Australia. So the Natas scheme and where we're going at the moment with the expansion work, I think supports all those objectives of the trajectory and supports all the great things we've been discussing today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, look, we are now over 7:30, so I will be wrapping up the session. That we could probably be talking about this for a very long time to come with lots of very interesting questions. We will have a chance to respond to some of those in writing over the coming period. For people who have registered for this session, we will send you an update, including details of how you can make a submission, responses to some of these questions, and a recording of this session. If you haven't registered for the session, I'd encourage you to keep an eye out on Renew's website. You can also email me, and I'll chuck my email address in there for anyone who is interested. If there is one key thing that you can do as someone who wants to see a change for better home construction standards in this round, I really encourage you to make a submission to this process. There are details on that website, and we've gone through some of those here today. There are some technical requirements to some of these submissions, but it is a really worthwhile thing to do. And we would really, really strongly encourage that. We'll send you some details of an explainer of some of the issues involved and the key issues in a submission. So I would really encourage people to consider doing that. On that note, we have gone past time, so we'd better wrap it up for the night. I would like to thank very sincerely all of our wonderful panelists tonight. There's a lot of expertise on the, I was going to say the stage, but I guess maybe the webcam. And we're really, really grateful to everyone for coming and taking part in this. So thank you so much to everyone for the evening, and look forward to being in touch soon.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for hosting, Rob. Great job.
Yes.
Happy to be involved.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
so much, everyone.
Questions. Yeah, really appreciate everyone's engagement.